Kumasi, Kintampo, Ejura, Atabubu area. There was serious drought. Now, when the rains started coming and farmers planted, that was the time fertilizer was needed. And if you remember last year, the season started, the government was not ready to release the subsidized fertilizer. Because the government was not ready, and at the time had not paid suppliers for what they supplied in 2020. So they were not also ready to supply. Along the line, in northern part of the country, when we started, the drought also catch up with them, and then the issue of fertilizers also came up. So when we settled with the fertilizer, and then we entered into the month of September, there was a serious flooding in most of the areas, which also affected the crop yields. So these were some of the factors that actually affected our production last year. And any factor that influence production will definitely influence yield per acre. Okay. And that determines the total productivity for the year. We actually did warn government about what saw on the field, and that we were likely to actually face this situation. And I think you are a witness to that. That's why we are experiencing what we have today.
So it's a case of late supply of fertilizers to you, the farmers?
Yeah, fertilizer is one of the factors, and then general cost of production is another factor, and then the climate issues was also another factor. And let me indicate that apart from these factors, there are also external factors, such as the impact of COVID, leading to close down of some of the machinery companies, high charges. So places where we used to rather buy some of our foodstuffs, they also came and bought from us. So all these things also put pressure on the limited supply that we had in the market. Because if you have more other people coming to buy your commodity, for instance, there are instances where people come from Burkina, people come from Togo to also compete with the little that we produce. So when that happens, the limited supply that we had will be lower than the demand. And once demand is higher than supply, prices will go up.
Let me bring Professor Ejiro in here. Professor Ejiro, is it a case of limited supply affecting the prices?
Of course. So for economics, that's it. If there is low supply, the given demand, then we expect prices per unit to go up. So adding to what Doc said, there's also an issue of our own seed quality. You know, if what we are cultivating, the quality of the seed is not good, then don't talk about good yield even when you have fertilizer and you have the rains and you have the pesticides. But of course, these prices have also gone down because the crop budget we are looking at, if you compared it from 2019, 2020, 2021, it's always increasing in terms of land preparation. Look at land preparation, the fuel prices. Because now, especially in the non-forest areas, where a lot of our grains are coming from, we use a lot of tractor preparation, and that is fuel. So fuel prices will go up. If fertilizer prices have gone up recently, especially because of the war, then you see that it is affecting the crop budget. It is not only fertilizer, but also the protectants. You look at the pesticides. Then the big issue with post-harvest facilities. If the little we harvest, we can store the durables and add value to a lot of the highly perishables. Then we will have some more availability despite what Doc is saying. Because we also depend a lot on imports of wheat, of rice, of oils, of sugar. A lot of our food is also imported. And he has talked about the export. I don't think that if you look at our non-traditional export values, it's so huge. I'm looking at what Ghana Export Promotion Council Authority brought last year. The export values are not so huge for the maize and the tomatoes and the onions, even rice goes sometimes. You see that these are going, but the volumes and the values that have been recorded are not so high. What I'm saying is that if we can tackle the thing comprehensively, then despite the external factors, we can do better than we are doing. So I'm always talking to my farming, and Charles knows. I'm also a member of the board of the Peasant Farmers Association now. So I like to talk to my farmers to do more with the good agricultural practices, especially the seed and the kinds of inputs that we are buying. They should be quality so that the environmental factors notwithstanding, we can get some better yield. And after that, the post-harvest handling. Yes.
But talking about
talking
about better yields, talking about good seeds would come at a cost. Today, the other challenge is the price of even the food. We've seen, the rate of food inflation, for instance, rising over the period, driving general inflation. Some Ghanaians have started complaining. They say a lot of things we were buying previously, and I started by sharing, the figures even from maize, for instance, to this year, compared to last year, even compared to January this year and February this year. They make the point that we've had to spend more. Does it look like the prices of food stuff or food would go down if we do all these things you're telling us?
Of course, in August, obviously, if our rain pattern, although I see Matthew saying our rain pattern this year may not be as good, but let's take it as given because it's in the near future. If our rain patterns are good, then as we always see, there will be a dip in July, August when we start harvesting a lot of the food commodities, including our cassava, our yams, our sweet potatoes. We have a large group of things in our basket. We don't depend solely on rice or solely on yam or solely on cocoa. We have a lot. Sorghum is going to come, millet will come, and the other grains, cowpea, and all these things that we eat them in Ghana. If we can depend more on them and not stop depending on the wheat or even the rice, but I'm saying that we have a wide range of things in the basket. Let our eye go on each of them and see that we are promoting each of them adequately. You will see that we have food. I know now the food prices have gone up, but it's also because we are tending to depend on too few of our food commodities. So the supply of those other commodities have become very, very low, and their prices per unit will go up. We are tending to depend too much on too few goods, when in our basket we can actually explore even cassava. We can explore it big time and get dependence on it rather than the wheat. That is my thinking.
Yes, now you talk about if the rains come, and Matthew is warning us of the rainfall patterns. Doesn't that in itself indicate that we may not necessarily achieve some of these things you're talking about?
Yeah, that has been our problem, I have to confess, because we have improved in irrigation, but not much. We still have not hit even 20% of our land under irrigation, any good irrigation. In Greater Accra, we've done better, because if we take the Dowenya, the Ashaman, the areas around even the cities, our farmers are doing irrigation a lot. But when you move into the hinterland, not much of our food crops are under irrigation. So that one is something that we pray about. You see, that one we leave it to divine.
Yes, but Professor Ejiro,
so that one is forgiven, and that's why we pray that the rains have started well. Some of us have already put our maize. You've seen it nicely. If there is no intermittent drought, what I'm saying is that the food will come as we see it each August. Each August, there's bumper harvest when the environmental factors are quite good.
Okay.
If there's no drought lengthening after May, for instance, and we get the 120 days of good rainfall pattern, intermittent sunshine, the way we want it, humidity, and the farmers are applying the good agricultural practices, quality seed, timely, protection of the maize from fall armyworm and things like that. In fact, agriculture as farm business is so complex. Even when you put it under irrigation, the worms can do their thing.
Sure.
There's so much that happens in the agriculture of farm production that it's so. That's why it's the passionate people who do it, and we want to support them. I don't want to mention government now because the fertilizer subsidy, as has been said already, because we don't produce the fertilizer and we depend on the world, whatever happens in the world will affect the subsidy. That one government can do nothing unless government wants to intentionally move something from another sector and bring it to agriculture, which I will support. If government can do that for us, then you can push the fertilizer down artificially. And that will be just one part of the story. Because as I've said, government, we will call on it to support seed also, quality seed. We will call on government to support with a lot of things, even the irrigation water prices. If we want good quality water, we have to pay for it. And government under the Ghana Irrigation Authority is giving subsidized water from the irrigation. But farmers are still not happy because the prices are high for them. So as for the high prices, I'm saying that probably it's difficult to talk about reducing by market prices. If government can intervene, fine. Otherwise, consumers, we have to be ready to pay higher because cost of production is increasing, and we
So it means that if we cannot pay higher, we might consider reducing the portions of food that we eat.
Exactly. That is what I'm preaching in my home already. In my home, in my church, at school, that's what I'm preaching. We have to start rethinking, not even quantum, but the other things we spend on, clothing, a lot of movement, a lot of things that we do with money that is not immediately too important. We have to. And that's what I have done. I have done. Even vehicle, I use a BMW. Sometimes I park it and use my small Uber so that I can save some fuel and use it for another thing. If we don't do that, we will only wish.
I see. But let me bring in Dr. Nyaba here. Dr. Nyaba, so you are farming just like Professor Ejiu. And yes, even though there's been challenges with fertilizer and all, government has reduced the rate of subsidy. There's still some subsidies on fertilizer. Do you have it now, and how is that impacting your planting this season?
Okay, thank you. Let me agree with my professor on some of the issues she raised, and then also disagree with her in the other issues. You see, if you look at prices of food come next year, it's going to be very difficult, even if you hold all the factors you mentioned constant, because cost of production is going high. So even if there's bumper harvest, it doesn't mean that the farmer will sell it at lower price. Because if you sell it at a lower price, it's not going to be able to meet the cost for producing an acre. Last year, when we did our crop budget, to produce 1 acre of maize was costing around 1,600 Ghana cedis.
Okay.
When we put in the current increase in input prices, including tractor services, we are getting 3,700 Ghana cedis per 1 acre. Because when you take fertilizer alone, even with the government subsidy, we have over 202% increase. Tractor services, the same thing. Agrochemicals, the same thing. So if a farmer has to spend this much to do 1 acre, no matter the yields per acre, that farmer wouldn't be comfortable selling it at a lower price. It means that the person is going out of business. Now, let me also indicate that if you are talking about prices increase, there are certain commodities, no matter how you want to diversify your food consumption, you cannot do without them. When you take maize and soybeans, for instance, without soybeans, it's going to be difficult for poultry farmers to remain in business.
Sure.
They will definitely have to buy maize and soya to be able to feed their birds. And so far, we've not been able to conduct research that we can effectively use crops like cassava in place of maize or sorghum to feed poultry. So poultry farmers will continue to depend on maize and sorghum. So these are things that we need to understand. So the only way we'll be able to let farmers remain in business is for government to take that cost. I don't think that there's a way, because
government to take which cost?
When you go to any other countries, what they do is to cut budget from other sectors and add on agriculture budget. But what we did in 2022 is rather to reduce agriculture budget. I've spoken to the Minister of Food and Agriculture, I've spoken to the Minister of Finance, and what is actually going to agriculture sector, the budget has been slowed down about 28%. And we think that is unfortunate. If you look at the financial subsidy itself, we have reduced the percentage and the quantity that we are subsidizing in this year. Last year it was around 38%. We reduced that to 15%.
Now let's talk about the fertilizer subsidy. Yes. Let's talk about let's talk about the fertilizer subsidy. Now, Dr. Nyaba, let's talk about the fertilizer subsidy briefly, because I've heard some of your colleagues make points that they are not even able to get the fertilizers. Do you get the subsidized fertilizer?
No, because the fertilizer companies are not willing to supply the subsidized fertilizer at the moment.
Why?
Because according to them, government, what they supplied in 2020, government still owned them 86 million Ghana cedis. What they supplied in 2021, government owned them 260 million Ghana cedis. And all this money hasn't been paid yet. They also have to go to banks and take loans to be able to bring in these fertilizers. Interest rate on those loans that they've taken continuously going up. And they're business people. We have approached them. They said, we are business people, Charles. We can't collapse our business because we want to provide fertilizer to you. So it is a duty of government to make sure that you settle them for them to be able to move the fertilizer. And as we speak, we don't have indications as to when government is ready to settle them. So we think that emphasis is a key component. When you go to northern part of the country, the lands are so bad that if you don't apply fertilizer, your yield level is very low. So the only thing for us to do now is for government to settle them, and then we'll move on.
Are you saying that these companies that are expected to give you subsidized fertilizer are not giving you because government owes them?
Of course, because according to them, that's what I'm saying. There are some companies where they supply in 2020, they haven't received a fresh one. But all the companies that supplied in 2021, none has received a penny. And these are companies who also go to banks and take loans with high interest rates, depreciation of the cedi because they have to change the money dollars to be able to bring in the fertilizer. So as a typical businessman, nobody will want to do such businesses continue to run at a loss. So the fertilizer they are even able to bring is an open market. And I'm telling you, some are selling it between 400, 450, and 500 Ghana cedis per 50 kg. As a farmer, if you need 4 bags of fertilizer for an acre, it means that if you are buying NPK for 450 times 3 price the urea, 500, it's over 2,000 for fertilizer alone. We are not talking about a plowing, we are not talking about a weed eater, we are not talking about labor. And that is the implication to the farmer.
Let me bring in Professor Ejiri. Professor Ejiri, you've been talking about improved seedlings and all of that. But, Charles raises the point that, look, their cost of production has gone up. And so even if they're able to have bumper harvest, because their cost has gone up, they still will sell it at higher price. And he makes reference to fertilizer, for instance, subsidized for that matter, which they can no longer get. Clearly, that impacts the ability to sell to us at the prices that would enable us to buy more, isn't it?
Yes, but supply will certainly shift slightly down. So we expect slight decreases. You, August, go to Ejura market, go to Techiman market, go to Tamale market, Mankesim, go to the big markets. You see how maize, how yams, cassava, beans, That's what I'm talking. Go to Boko Market. So, by all means, child, the prices will go down slightly. They would have gone down further if the input cost was lower. I agree with you. But I'm saying that our own food prices, tomato prices, my own mango prices, when we start harvesting, they go down because these are highly perishable. And we don't have a lot of facilities for managing our perishables. So their unit prices go down during the bumper harvest. That one, I have seen it in more than 40 years as I'm growing up. And the story has not changed. So much as I know that the prices are high now, I know in August they will go slightly down. But they will go further down, like he's saying, if somebody called the government can support the smallholder farmer who is not able to revisit other models of financing. You see, our smallholder farmers depend so much on government interventions.
Sure.
The medium to large-scale farmers, they are not a lot, maybe 10 to 20%. They are now rethinking other investment models. And when you do that, a lot of it will come to the consumers. And that's why I'm also advising my consumers to take charge, brace it up. Food is a necessity. It's an inelastic commodity. So my bowl of kenke, I will still eat my bowl of kenke, whether it's 1 cedi or 2 cedi. So brace up. It means that the services you are also rendering, you should do some things to get other sources of income. We have to do something. By all means, because government, he's saying government owes. Government does not only owe agricultural businesses. Government owes a lot of other contractors. Do you get me? So we are not sure whether in this next 2 months, but by now fertilizer should have been with the farmers. I have already bought my market level because I am middle income. I have my own source of other funding for my farming. So I don't depend on a few of us, 10 to 20%, as I've said, do not depend on and will not wait for government. But the bulk of our farmers will wait because they cannot raise the financing themselves. And that is why I am thinking that consumers are in the chain. They should also brace up to paying slight higher prices so that farm income will go up and we can plow back at farming. As for this year, the situation is not only because government owes people, but the situation is also because fuel prices have gone up. A number of prices have also gone up. That's what I can say.
Okay, finally from you, let me hear from you finally, Dr. Nyaba, because you say it's time for a lot of you to plant. The fertilizers are not there. And so for you, we should brace ourselves. We have to pay more for food. Finally from you.
But we are still trying our best. As I speak, we are preparing to meet the Minister of Food and Agri this afternoon. We have a series of proposal for him. We are just hopeful that he would accept some of them. And if that happens, we'll be able to reduce the cost of production. And then maybe in the months of August, September, when we start harvesting, we will also be able to sell them at a moderate price to consumers. But if that doesn't happen, then just like Prof said, consumers will be ready to diversify their consumption to other commodities. And those that will be high for industry, then we leave that one for industry. But for prices, I don't foresee prices coming down if these measures are not put in place.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Charles Nyaba, who is Director of Advocacy of the Peasant Farmers Association. And thank you also, Professor Irene Ejiri, who's an agri-economist, for joining us here on the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 FM. Stay with us when we return after these messages. We get to share your thoughts that you've been sharing with us on Twitter here on the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 FM. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Say donut, 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 donut. Hey, donut, 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 donut. Donut, donut. Then come cut up donut, donut, donut. Malaria syrup donut. Everybody follow not sa malaria. The 3D till no not now. Oh, one toe malaria chill. Oh, popo. What mean the